My exhibition at Wolverhampton Art Gallery consists of papercuts and ceramics, and it's entitled Remember Me. My practice as a fine artist is multifaceted, and I work on paper cut on paper, ceramic. I've also worked on glass and also more recently with film. The central processes though that I use on all these substrates are collage and drawing, and it's through the methodology of collage predominantly that I structure the work. One aspect of the show that I hope is revealed is that although my experience is that of a fine artist, and I still see myself as a fine artist, that my work's been very influenced by the decorative and applied arts, and that I hope that this show reveals the way in which I cross boundaries between fine art and craft practice. I think that in my work there's a tension between the physicality of the material that I'm using and also the spirit that I want to imbue it with. And I want to give a sense that the female figure is fluid and that she is transient, but the kind of tactile pattern and organisation of the surface is very much present, and that she's somehow sort of captured within this sort of mesh of pattern. I always start with drawing, just simple line pencil drawing. Sometimes I use images from magazines or journals. I often use the internet as a starting point for shapes, particularly female figures, and I also use myself. And if I draw directly from elements like sculptures or from paintings, I often then copy them so that they become simplified and refined according to what I want. Once I've got a number of drawings, figure drawings, skirt patterns, different kind of vessels, I then started to think about how they could be juxtaposed in the composition and used on the plates. But also the tracings can be much more flexible with the elements and to treat them like fragments. I think of the skirts as being animated even though they haven't got a body in them. I think of them as kind of almost being occupied by a figure. So the process of drawing and changing and redrawing allows me to continually refine the shapes and the forms that I want to then develop. And again, when I then develop the drawings into collage and start cutting with the scalpel blade then becomes the equivalent of a pencil line. I think collage is interesting for me for a number of reasons. One is that it's a process that's often associated with women. So for example, if you think of quilting, which is a collage process with textiles, it's also got this aspect that you are destroying and cutting up as well as making. And I think that's important in the sense that you are deconstructing and actually violating something by cutting it up, and then you're putting it together again. It's very empowering, and also it gives one a sense that one has control over it. And at any moment when I'm working, I know that the piece always has the potential to be cut up. It can always be destroyed. The other aspect of collage that's interesting to me is the way in which, when you put an image together, being made up of fragments, visually it has the potential to fall apart. Even though when it's complete, it still is not solidly there. It always could fragment. And the female figure, she's made up of fragments, and the whole image is made up of fragments. And for me, that gives a sense of fragility, even though I want the sense that the female figure is choosing to move through the space. My working method of collage is one that I also bring to all these substrates that I work on. So when I work with transfers onto ceramic, my method is actually very similar. So I construct patterns and fragments of images onto transfer paper, and they are made of silkscreen using ceramic ink, and those are then my collage material, which I cut up and very intuitively apply fragments to the ceramic. I use very few different patterns. I use these three, sometimes I use this one, which was a previous pattern that I had made, and I also created a number of fragments. Some of those were again ones that I had made from a previous project. and these are included in this project. And so from project to project I gather actually quite a large number of fragments left over of transfers, which I often use or kind of recycle for the next project, even though for each project, like with this one, I've made patterns specially for it. In addition to these 3 main patterns, I've also used a small number of colour sheets. I've used around 6, and these colour sheets I hand cut the figures from and my shapes, my silhouettes. So working onto paper, across ceramic, or in glass, I think that my approach is the same. But obviously working on ceramic as opposed to a piece of paper or a canvas, the meaning of the ceramic ware is there. It has a very different meaning than if you were working on a canvas. Once I've put the transfers onto the plates, then I fire them. And they fire at quite a low temperature, at 850 centigrade, and then that's it. They come out of the kiln, and sometimes they don't work because the plate's misbehaved or the bubbles have been under the transfer, and then I just have to redo them. But the actual process, once the transfers are onto the plates, is very simple. For me, it's interesting to put the imagery of the female figure onto the plates, because plates do not have very much financial value, and I think to place imagery which has potentially the same gravitas and with the same attention that perhaps one would put onto a painting on canvas has the potential to elevate the substrate of the crockery in the way that it wouldn't otherwise have. The title of the exhibition, Remember Me, is also the title of the piece that I've made specially for the exhibition. The wall piece, Remember Me, is made up of about 120 plates. And Remember Me refers to Purcell's Dido and Aeneas, and in particular the lament that Dido sings before she dies. And what I think is especially interesting about this music for me is that the music has this sort of ethereal otherworld quality, and that contrasts with the words that are sung, which refer to the tactile and the physical earth. She talks about darkness, she talks about the earth, and she talks about death. And although I don't think that my work is specifically about death and grief, I think this sense of pending loss, which is so much part of that aria, is something which I'm interested in my own work, in the sense that my work is very physical and tactile. To me, this pattern and the surface is very important, that it's something that you can experience with the senses. And I want this sense that she is appearing and disappearing, and because she's actually moving across the ware, ultimately she's moving across and out, as it were, into another world. And so I hope that the spirit of the piece, whilst I want it to be pleasurable to look at, I also want to imbue it with the sense of her transience and the sense that she won't be there for very long and that she is passing through, literally.